Okay, this is section 1010, simplifying complex rational expressions. For the test, we are covering 10.1 through 10.10, and we're not adding 10.9 on there. We'll do 10.9 afterwards, but we're having the test on Friday, and so that should be there. This is section 1010, simplifying complex rational expressions. So right away when we look at this, it's a fraction within a fraction, kind of like a superfraction. What would be my least common denominator between all three denominators? 6. So we're going to really multiply this by a fancy 1, right? And we're going to call it 6 over 6. Doesn't that really equal 1? You guys with me? So if I multiply by 6 over 6, write it like this. Okay, I'm going to put, first of all, you have to put the parenthesis over the whole thing because there's two of them. If I just put the parenthesis over the 6, right? If I just put it like this, then that really only means for the numerator. Remember, parenthesis means multiplication, but this means you're only multiplying by this. That's why the parenthesis really needs to be around the big fraction too. So you get both parts of the numerator. Do you understand? So now, sometimes I set it up like 6 over 1, 6 over 1, so I'm set up to cross cancel. Doesn't 6 over 1 simplify to 6? And 6 over 1 simplifies to 6, so it's still 6 over 6. But so now I'm going to distribute it here. Sometimes I write it on both sides, right? If I have two of them, I'm still multiplying by 6 over 1, 6 over 1. But here, this way, when I'm cross-canceling, I can make notes. 3 goes into 3 once and into 6 how many times? 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. And then when I distribute here, 2 goes into 2 once and into 6 how many times? 3. 3 times what's left? X is plus 3x. And now when I distribute, the 6 cross cancels and we're left with x. See how I don't really need to write it twice. I could have just done it. I could have just written it like this. Is that making sense to you? Do you have to write the 1? In fact, I'm going to make it like dotted. Like it's there, but it's not there. Is there anything else we can do? Is there anything else we can do? No. On your 8th grade standard, you will have to do this. Except they won't have the variables. Like they'll have a fraction up top and a fraction on the bottom. Okay. All right, next one, let's try it. I'm putting my, what is my least common denominator? 10. So I'm going to multiply by 10 over 10, right? Do you want to put it over 1 or no? Okay, so when I distribute here, Nicole, what gets cross-canceled? And what am I left with? 5, and so we're left with 5 times 1 is 5. When I distribute here, the 5 gets canceled. What am I left with? A 2. 2 times x is 2 plus 2x. You guys with me? Are you writing as we go? So here, nothing gets canceled. So that's going to stay a minus 10x. But here, 5 goes into 5 once and into 10. 2 times what? It becomes an 8. Okay. So questions? Yes.
Would you factor the 8 times 10?
We can. There's a 2. Okay, let's go. In the numerator, it's going to be a 5 plus 2x over 2 times what? 4 minus 5x. I might do a negative, but I don't need to flip it around for any reason, so I'm just going to leave it like that. These are both equivalent. I personally do like the factored form. Do you want to try number 2? Okay, pause the recording. Okay, I'm going to put the PowerPoint on, so just to clarify that, in case you want an example. You should be working. Okay, so what is our common denominator? Y. So we are multiplying by y over y, or y over 1 times y over 1. When I distribute to the first one, right? When I distribute over here, what do we get? A y. When I distribute here, what do we get? Plus 1. When I distribute here, what do we get? A 3 over 3. And when we distribute here, what do we get? Minus y, right? And we're done. Questions? Minus 1. Y times negative 1 is negative y. There's no denominator to cross-cancel the y. Okay? Questions? Okay, let's go on to the next one. Yes.
Wait, can you go back to it?
I'm recording. Yes. Hurry up quickly. Okay. Let's try the next one. What do you think is the least common denominator? You want a minute to write it down? All right. What's my least common denominator here? Go, Jamie.
4y.
A 4y. So I'm multiplying everything by 4y. I personally like to show it on both sides. And I don't want to see you guys going that way. I want you going up and down. So I do 1 over 4y minus 1/2 all over 1/2 minus 1 over 4y. And so as I multiply, I like to show 4y over 4y, right? And I'm doing 4y over and 4y over. Really should have parentheses on both of those. And then, are you guys with me? And so now when we distribute, what do I get for the first numerator? A 1. What do I get when I get here? Minus 2y. Good. And in the denominator? Good. And here we're left with minus 1. Now, I'm left with 1 minus 2y over 2y minus 1. What do? Factor a negative 1 out of either numerator or denominator. Oh, yeah. So I'm getting negative 1. If they're opposites, 100% you have to. And then I'm left with negative 1 times, it flips it around. Remember what I was trying to teach you? 2y minus 1 all over 2y minus 1. And then we are left with negative 1. Okay, questions? Do you see why you had to? Because it's something that can be cross-canceled. If it's the opposite, you always factor out the negative 1. Some people earlier were calling this multiply by negative 1. We can't multiply because we have to use a property of equality. If I multiply by something, it has to be the same on numerator and denominator. But this is really containing a negative 1. All I'm doing is pulling it out of it. Do you understand? I'm not really multiplying it, I'm factoring it out. Okay, so we are always using our properties of equality. And I don't want to see you do the run-on sentence with the equal signs because these are expressions. All right, next one. What do you think my least common denominator is? A squared. So I'm multiplying everything by a squared. So when I distribute to the first one, what's left? A 5a, right? And when I distribute to the 1, what's left? Good. And then what's left when I distribute to the 3 over negative 3 over a squared? Minus 3. Is there any factoring I can do? No. So that's my answer. Next one, what do you think is the least common denominator? AB. I'm multiplying everything by AB. So when I distribute to the first fraction, what's left? A 1. When I distribute to the 1 over a b. Good. When I distribute to 1 over b, so it's b minus a. Now notice, in this one, an AB is because here, and I have a single A and a single B. You with me? So AB works. But is that going to work here if I just do XY?
No,
Why?
because it's x minus y, not x y.
There's a binomial there, and you can't take a piece of a binomial. So the XY, if I do an XY, it'll work for this, but it won't work for this. I need an XY times x minus y binomial. Does that make sense? Okay, and so now I've got, when I distribute here, what do I get?
How come you do x times x?
Because the xy helps me for this and this. But the x minus y helps me for this denominator. You can't take a piece of a binomial. Yes. So when I get that, the x cancels out and we're left with y times x minus y. Right? When I distribute here, when I distribute, that's an x, right? When I distribute here, I'm end up with, it's a minus sign from right here, and then we've got the, what cancels is the y, and I'm left with x times x minus y. In the denominator, right? When I distribute here, the x minus y cancels, and we're left with xy. Can I factor yet? Can we factor? No, because we've got to mix those numerators. So here I get a xy minus y squared, and then I get a minus x squared and plus xy, all over xy. I don't understand.
Wait, how'd you get x? Oh, because you multiplied y.
Right. Okay, so now what I've got to combine my like terms. So I'm going to go with a negative x squared, putting it in alpha order. That's plus 2xy, and then minus y squared all over xy. In the numerator, we can factor in negative 1, and we're left with something like this. Does anybody recognize that? What do we call that? Yep. Like the coefficient of this is 1. So what multiplies to 1 and adds to negative 2?
-1, -1.
Yep. So this is going to be a negative 1 times, what's the root of that? We have an x and an x. What's the root of that? A y and a y. And it's minus 1 and a minus 1. It's like that 1 is there, but we don't have to write it.
How come you have to multiply by -1?
Well, to factor it, it's hard to factor with a lead coefficient being negative. We're not multiplying it, we're factoring it. Do you understand the difference? We're dividing it out. We're leaving it on the side. Is there anything we can cross cancel? No. So if you had written negative 1 times x minus y squared, I'd be okay over xy, that's fine too. Or you could call it y minus x squared, without the negative 1. If you'd done that, right? Okay, questions? Let's see if we got the right answer, right? Both of those are correct. All right. Now on this problem, what do you think we do first? It's 1 over x squared minus 1 over 3 over x plus 1. Brianne.
There's a difference of squares in the denominator.
So we have to,
We would have to factor out to x plus 1 times upon a
right, 1 over x plus 1 times x minus 1 all over 3 over x plus 1. So what's my least common denominator? X plus 1 times x minus 1, x plus 1 times x minus 1, right? And when we distribute here, what are we left with? In the numerator,
1.
just a 1, right? This cancels with this, and this cancels with this. And when I distribute here, what gets cross-canceled? And we're left with 3 times x minus 1. Questions? Okay, next one. Yep.
The last one is 1 over 3x minus 1. Why wouldn't you do 1 over 3x minus 3? Oh, never mind.
Okay, I mean, I like it factored like this. Okay, I think we have a couple more. They seem to do a lot more than me, don't they? They're just rewriting it a couple times. I just do it, I don't do this extra time. They rewrite it 2 extra times. Okay, so what do we do first? Good, and so it'll be 6 over x. Do you want to try this? Pause it and you guys try. Here we go. So the first one is x plus 3. The second one is x minus 3. That's in the numerator. And then in the denominator, we have 4 over x plus 3 times x plus 3. Okay, what am I multiplying the entire fraction by? What's the least common denominator, Brianne?
I put x plus 3 squared times the quantity of x minus 3.
Right, so we need an x plus 3. Oops. I'm just going to go, okay. We need x plus 3 times x plus 3 times x minus 3. And here, same thing. Oops, I forgot the little divide by. X plus 3 times x plus 3 times x minus 3, right? And now when I distribute here, the plus 3 gets canceled, the minus 3 gets canceled, so what's left? 6 times x plus 3. The next one, when I distribute here, the plus 3 gets canceled, the plus 3 gets canceled, and we're left with 4 over x minus 3. Am I done? What else can I do, Mike?
Multiply 6.
No, we're not going to multiply. We're trying to, yep.
Would you, what is it called? Cross it.
Yeah, what can I divide out? Reduce.
2.
A 2, and this will be a 3, and this will be a 2. So my answer is 3 times x plus 3 over 2 times x minus 3. Right, sorry, I meant 3. Oops, I don't know why I read through that. All right, questions there? Okay, I can show you here. They do it in multiple steps. First, they factored the denominator. Okay, then they're finding the least common denominator. They said it the same way Brianne did. And there we go. Did anybody stop at the 6 and the 4? Okay. So I believe that's our lesson for today. So that's 10:10.